following episode contains themes of childhood sexual abuse. Listener discretion is advised.
G'day and welcome back to the Brink, everybody.
Before we begin, feel free to like, share, subscribe and follow.
Why do they have to do that?
Because it helps us.
I've never actually liked, shared and subscribed to anything, to be honest.
Anyway, guys, thanks for your support and more importantly, enjoy the episode.
I just want to say, like when David told me what happened to you, I like, that's just like, it's unbelievable. Like, wow. Like, honestly.
You know what though? We'll talk about this a lot. It kind of is to other people, but to me,
yeah,
it's just there's dissociation for a start, but also, I guess, at some point I've tapped into different potentials, so it's become a necessary part of the story, which is actually fundamentally helped me to build, I guess, a community. So I can't really
have one without the other.
Yeah, that's right. I can't be sad about it anymore. And I tend not to get upset about it because I kind of feel like it was, and I will say this on there because I think it needs to be said, I feel like it was put on me for a reason. I don't feel like the victim at all. I feel like I was meant to carry that, to break some cycles and then to continue stuff forward. That may well be a coping mechanism. It may well be a story that I've told myself, but out of all the stories I could choose, I'd rather that one.
No, that's my
awesome lady. I mean, coping mechanisms, they don't have to be bad, do they?
No, they don't. They don't. And I think the thing is that we teach as therapists, and this is where I think I'm different. We teach as therapists the cognitive way of dealing with things rather than the somatic, more spiritual, energetic way of dealing with things. So I'm not woo-woo or anything like that, but I do know that quantum science and the human experience do
collide.
Yeah. So that's really important.
Well, let's get into it, and we'll just introduce you so our listeners can get an idea of who you are. So today's episode is a deeply important one. We're joined by UK-based psychotherapist Ella McCrystal, a survivor whose personal story of childhood abuse and incredible transformation is nothing short of inspiring. Ella experienced trauma at the hands of her father, and the impact of that abuse followed her into adulthood, shaping her mental health, relationships, and her sense of self. Ella fought her way through the darkness, eventually reclaiming her story and becoming a psychotherapist. Now, she helps others navigate their own healing journeys. In this episode, we'll be looking at the effects of childhood abuse through the lens of someone who's lived it and now treats it, to better understand the devastating and lifelong impact trauma can have on a child well into adulthood. Well, Ella, thank you so much. It's a huge honour to have you here.
Absolutely.
It's a privilege, an absolute privilege. We've spoken on the phone briefly before today, and we've had a little giggle already today. So although the subject matter might not be the most cheerful, we can all, smile and choose what we tap into each day, and we've already started on a high note, I feel, so it is a pleasure to be here.
Oh, that's really nice. It's quite humbling.
So tell us a little bit about the journey that's gotten you to where you are today.
Okay, so in terms of, obviously you've introed a little bit there, I am going to say I've got this on my lap, so if you...
who's this?
This is Walter.
Hi, Walter.
Is Walter real? Because Walter looks like a doo-doo.
A what?
A doo-doo.
That's a French stuffed toy.
For stuffed toy. Walter
Well, he's a toy poodle, so he is French.
He's a poodle. Oh, beautiful.
Yes, he is. But he sometimes barks, so I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay.
Just in case. Okay.
Yeah, that's no drama.
We're dog friendly.
Yeah.
Good. And that's a positive. I've also got another one lying on the floor, so it could just go a little bit mental at times, and that would just add to the flavour.
Okay.
So, moving swiftly on, you introduced the story there, the childhood sexual abuse. So my dad sexually abused me as a child, and although a lot of people are really uncomfortable talking about that subject, one, because the subject of sexual abuse in children is not a pleasant one, but also I think when it's in the home and when it's in the family, it has a real visceral effect on people. They feel really disturbed, I think, thinking about these things. It's not pleasant, and obviously for a lot of people it's a switch off moment. No one really wants to talk about it, but it happens. It's not just me that it happens to. Through my work, that I've seen many women and men that have been sexually abused by a family member. It's much more common than we know, and most people don't talk about it because it is so taboo. So up until the age of 11, I was sexually abused by my dad. I ended up sort of accidentally revealing the story through sharing a journal in a class at school. But it was snatched out of someone's hand. So I gave it to a friend of mine and it got snatched out of his hand. So we were in a maths class at the time, and it just spread like wildfire. The gossip just took over, and I ended up running out to class, into the toilets, locking myself in. And that for me was probably, out of all of the experiences I've ever had, the most scary one. So my dad was violent at times. He was obviously sexually abusive as well. But that moment when everybody knew about it was the worst moment of my life, because there was no turning back. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that was I could no longer protect my dad.
Hang on. So were you protecting your dad? Did he tell you to protect him? And when did it start? Do you remember when it started?
Well, it's funny because when I originally told this story, I thought it started at around 7. So legally it would be classed as from 7. But I have had lots of memories since of stuff that would be considered, I call it testing or grooming phases. So these are things that people will do to you to see how much they can get away with before they up the ante, if you like. So, and the reason I reference that now is these are things that people can look out for. If a male member of your family is taking a young child to the toilet at the age of 5 to clean them, you do need to have your wits about you, because that's the sort of thing that a child won't question. A child won't say, I think this is sexual abuse. A child will be told this is your dad cleaning you, and they have no reference or no frame of reference or analysis to be able to work out that even if it's uncomfortable or it hurts, you don't know that it's not cleaning.
Yeah.
Told by everybody that it is. They say my mum might well have thought that was what was going on. So she's telling you that's what it is. He's telling you that's what it is.
Wow. So is that how it started for you? Is that how it first started?
Yeah. So I would say my earliest memories of that would be around 5.
So you would say, sorry, because I've got a 5-year-old daughter. So it's interesting because she goes to the toilet and she stopped asking me to come to the toilet to wipe her bum, right? Yeah. Which is a bit of a pain in the ass because she's not very good at wiping her bum. Okay, so don't tell her that.
We've all got kids. We know.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so that's really interesting. And now she's like, no, so she doesn't ask me anymore. So I just it is what it is, But that's really interesting you say that, because I always felt it kind of quite awkward anyway, I mean, obviously, she didn't ask me to come to the toilet when she was going number ones, but it always is an awkward,
Yeah.
It's because it's it's a little girl or even a little boy, it's very.
It gets to a stage where it becomes unnecessary, and also because it is that age where, and I say this because it's an age where kids do sometimes still need, as you've referenced there, a little bit of help. So it's an easy time to start introducing other ways of cleaning without it being questioned.
Yeah,
because
right.
It can be suggested that this is being done for, you're not very good at cleaning yourself, so let me do that.
Okay.
And so it's only reflectively looking back, being a mother myself.
Yes.
Knowing that you don't clean like that. That's not how you clean a child.
Right,
so
right.
That's when I realised, and it sounds silly now because to people that haven't been abused, it sounds silly to say that now because you'd think that the penny would drop sooner. But remember, and this is really important, and I talk about this a lot in terms of brain development. The front part of the brain, the executive function, doesn't start to fuse until you're 7 years old. So before that age, everything goes in unfiltered. There is no filter, no analysis, no logic, no planning, no organising. So everything a child is told and everything they experience is going into the brain without question, without analysis. Analysis begins from about 7, but remember, it's analysis based on a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
that front bit fully develops in the mid-20s. That's when we've got the benefit of hindsight thinking, the benefit of long-term thinking. We can't plan. Teenagers inherently are ridiculous, their behaviour, because they don't analyse and logicalise and organise information very well. So it's really in the adult years that we start to look back. And it was only when someone asked me this question, what age did it start? And I started to really think about it. And I was like, in terms of legality, it starts at 7. But actually looking back and remembering, I now see that it was definitely earlier. But again, I would call that the testing phase, because that's what can I get away with where she won't say anything, and then how do I up the ante? And again, I don't know, and I've got to say this because when it's a parent or a brother or an uncle that is abusing, there's two sides to them.
Yeah.
There is the dad and there is the abuser. So I've got a dad that the Jekyll and Hyde. I've got the dad that I was scared of and didn't like, and then I've also got the dad that was my dad. So it's this conflict and this split of who is this person and how do I manage this without having any analysis or ability to logicalise what's happening.
Wow.
And does the human mind tend to compartmentalize that, so there's like a break?
Yeah, so I think first of all I would say the mind is the body. So the mind and the body are the same thing, the brain-body system. We've often separated brain and body. And when we talk about the subconscious, we often think of it as the subconscious brain or the subconscious mind. But the mind is the brain-body. And so the body compartmentalizes it as well. So to give context to that, if I use the word dissociation, if a child goes through a trauma, it doesn't have to be a sexual trauma. It can be, losing a parent or being severely bullied at school. The body will also compartmentalise, and by that I mean dissociate, shut down, lock it down in the body. So you become numb and you become very, very good at this has happened, but I can't tell, because you asked the question earlier, did your dad, ask you to protect him? He didn't ask me to protect him, but he did say don't tell anyone because they won't understand. It wasn't done violently, that bit. When he was violent, he was violent. Sexual abuse, for want of a better phrase, tends to be gentler and more, and this is very uncomfortable for people, but more intimate. It's not done in the violent way. People have got a massive misconception about sexual abuse, that it's this scary, violent thing. Unfortunately, and this is where it robs you of so much as a human being.
Yeah.
Your intimacy.
Yeah. You think it's normal. You thought it was normal because you were just a little kid.
You've got no reference. Again, you're going back to the brain. You've got no reference of what that looks like. So, in terms of intimacy, that is destroyed forever, because you'll never have intimacy the way the people do.
Can I ask a question? And it might seem ignorant, but going through that to the point of it being revealed, which sounds like it was an enormous trauma in itself.
Yeah.
Was the period during it's just such heavy language. But during the period of abuse, would you describe that as traumatic, or was it traumatic once it was out in the open, you were dealing with having to it be visible in your life and then looking back on it and seeing it as abuse? How do you unpack that?
It's a funny one. That's a very good question, actually, and I'll tell you why. Because I think when we talk about dissociation, so I've often said this before, when you're sexually abused, you still go to school the next day and you've still got playground and teachers and normal life to crack on with. So this thing happens in the home, and then you wake up the next day and it's almost like you have to wipe it. So you have to wipe it from your mind, you have to wipe it from your body. And that's where I say the body kind of does that for you because of the protective mechanism. So when you reference that and you say, was it trauma? The interesting thing here is, I would say that I knew from the very first obvious time of sexual abuse. I say obvious because the bit before was the grooming phase.
Yep.
I knew that I didn't like it. I knew that it was uncomfortable. I knew that even at the age of 6, 7, 8, I knew that I was changed forever. I knew that my dad was no longer the dad that everybody else had. So there was, I say there's no analysis, but there's like an innate response. I don't think children, although they can't although they can't analyse, they also have an integral response to what's right and what's wrong, but they don't have the words or the understanding or the ability to frame that feeling in a way that makes sense, that they could just go and tell someone. And also, children self-abandon. A child will always self-abandon because a couple of reasons why. One, you love your parents, that's just natural, and they're supposed to be your protectors, and they're supposed to be everything that matters in the world, because they are the ones that feed you, they're the ones that put a roof over your head, they're the ones that wake you up in the morning, you know. So there's that natural love for your parents, but also we as human beings don't start to develop our ego boundaries until we're about 11 or 12. So we can't say that's them and this is me. What we do as humans is that we are all as one. So, you know, my home, my school, my family, we're all as one. So if you're hurting me or doing something to me, it must be because of me.
Okay.
It's like almost the narcissistic phase of human development. It is all about us. So if someone hurts us, it's about us. And if someone loves us, it's about us. It's only as we get older that we're able to individualise and zoom out a little bit and say, actually, what you're doing to me is wrong.
So all of these developmental processes that we are supposed to go through as children, the development of the frontal cortex, these, you know, what you're just discussing now, they must be irrevocably damaged.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to, you know, at some point get into would be talking about the knock-on effects for what sort of adult does a child like that become, because the development must be utterly mutated.
Yes. So interestingly, I from about when my dad, you know, he was arrested after that journal was shared through the class, and he admitted what he did and went to prison. So that happened.
Oh, so he got caught then?
Yes. So that was. I mean, luckily, and again, this is where I say there's a sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing here, because when it was revealed the way it was, he didn't then deny it, and there was no kind of, oh, Ella's lying. Luckily for me, he admitted it straight away and then went to prison. But my mum and dad are still together today. And
What?
So even after he admitted it,
Your mum and dad are still together?
I don't have a relationship with them now, but that only, I mean, I'm 46 now for time reference. It was only...
What?
This is what I tell people, so they do that. I know they're just playing with me.
Whatever. No, I'm 67.
Wow. We obviously drink some sort of break. So she, basically, that they're still together. I stopped speaking to them at the age of 37 because it just became too toxic. It was too triggering for me. But when I was taken home, so my dad was arrested, taken to whatever they do, put him on remand. When I was taken home, my mum's first words were, I don't know if I'm going to stay married to your dad. So I knew straight away that there was a huge possibility, and I knew deep down in my soul instinctively that when he'd come, I didn't know what prison time would look like, how long it would look, but when he'd done it, he was coming back. Because my mum just, she couldn't live without him, and she has never lived without him. So
Can I, sorry to interrupt, were you 11 when that happened? You were 11? Yes. Okay, so from your, it probably started happening around 5, the grooming, but from 7 to 11, it was getting pretty... Yeah,
it was heavy, yeah.
Okay, so
never rape, just for the record. It was never rape, so it was classed as serious sexual assault. I don't know what the legality is now, but...
What's serious sexual assault? Is that like...
So that is penetration without genitals.
Okay, and that's what he was doing?
Yeah.
And was he making you do anything to him or anything like that?
Yes, so I would have to perform sex acts on him, and then there was penetration without genitals. So that... And this is why I bring this up, because although that's hard to hear and it's difficult to talk about for a lot of people, the justice system is really specific in the way, and this is why we see sentencing, especially in the UK, is not actually that big for...
No, it's a joke.
Crimes. Yeah,
it's a joke.
Penetration has happened.
But hang on, like sorry to interrupt, but like for me, like that is it is the cruelest, the worst thing that a man could do to anyone, like his own daughter. Like it doesn't matter if there's no sexual contact or that your bits and pieces haven't gone in. The fact that he's like done that to you, look, it's sacred. Like they should throw away the fucking key. Excuse me for swearing, but do you know what I mean? It's like it should be like classed as rape, a violent rape. It should be the top echelon, not the it's okay because it was dad. Like it's horrendous.
And why is it not? I mean, this is a whole nother divergent conversation we could have. But why? Just briefly, why do you think it's not? Because we spoke to a New Zealand guy the other day, Sam, who shared his story about sexual abuse, and he's currently campaigning, doing a walk through New Zealand to have petitions signed for Parliament to extend jail time for sexual offenders. And it's unbelievable. He's not even asking that much. Like what he's asking for seems ridiculously light, and they're not even there yet.
It's a huge political issue, isn't it? This gets into another area here, but we know that you only have to look at recent times. UK, I can reference more so than other places, where we see the people such as Hugh Edwards, Savile, these people that were testing child pornography or actually touching and raping people. People knew about it, it's hidden. And the reason it's hidden, in my opinion, is because paedophilia and child sex abuse and sex trafficking is going on at every single level. Yeah. So I mean, yes, you could say we need tougher sentences. We definitely do. But whilst paedophiles exist in all areas of life, they're never going to do that.
That's what we said. Yeah, that's what we surmised the other day. Like,
true.
Our friend said that. Sam said that. He's like, "Hey, the judges," and when he said that, I was like, "Hey," but it's true. Like, it permeates every walk of life, right?
Yeah,
like,
it does.
There'll be guys in Parliament there'll be guys that are sitting on panels. There'll be people that are sitting in health clinics. There'll be people that are doctors, lawyers, like just everywhere.
And to the degree that they protect each other.
Yeah, I would say
sure.
Absolutely.
I can't say too much, but I've worked with people that are trafficked or have been trafficked, paedophile rings, those sorts of things. They're the victims of these things. That we know there's videos of and photos of them out there being raped from as young as 6 years old. So that's why I was making the definitions here. Because I feel that I was violated, and I know that with internal experiences that young, that it has changed my my experience of sex forever. I said before on different podcasts, my first kiss was with my dad. Even those intimate first experiences, the first to touch my body in a sexual way was my dad. That's been completely taken away. There's no nice first memories of anything that's supposed to be intimate and sacred and loving and beautiful. That has been taken away from me. So of course your experience of sex after that is there's no boundaries. You don't see the red flags. You don't understand what it's supposed to feel like to be loved and cared for and to be someone's princess. All of that's gone. These children that are sex trafficked, and one of the girls that I work with we know from a logbook that she has hold of, that there's over 1,000 people that have paid to have sex with her.
With one person?
One person from as young as 6 years old.
What?
It's videoed, photographed, and there will be videos and photographs out there of her. She's in her 30s now, but
Sorry.
Go on. No. I mean, this is why I got into the work that I do, because she'd never told. Well, she tried to tell someone before, but the therapist that she spoke to couldn't cope with some of the stuff that she was saying, so she ended up finding me. And that's why I've spoken out about these things, because there are people out there that have gone through, and I dare, this is a difficult thing for me to say, because people will always say you should never compare trauma. From where I'm standing, what I went through and some of the stories I've heard, there are stories that are far, far worse and more horrifying than mine, that have never been spoken about. People hold this in. They never tell anyone because they're trying to protect their families, or they're trying to protect And sadly, when those children are sex trafficked like that, I've got to tell you, the families know, or the families are involved, because how can you imagine being a father?
How can they be? What? Can you explain that? What happened? What do you mean they know?
Children are shared, and these sex trafficking rings, often the parents have sold them for reasons of these parents are drug addicts, or they're in poverty, or they are in the paedophile rings themselves.
Wow.
So the children just become a commodity.
So
this is a big thing. Vicars, police, government officials, these people are involved in these cases.
Of course. So, and that's why it's all undercover and it's hardly ever talked about. And you have to. It's literally blowing my mind.
So when somebody like yourself or the young girl you're just mentioning, when they arrive at adulthood, because I'm sure, I mean, the statistics on suicide for abused boys and girls is enormous. We've just been learning about that. It's the amount of people who wind up in jails, the addicts, the drug abuse, the alcohol abuse. It's enormous. So if they even manage to get to adulthood, like, what did it do to you on that path between the abuse being revealed? You were still young. You had your teenage years to get through. You arrive at 20. Like, what sort of adult can you expect to see untreated?
To be honest, I was, I guess you would call a problem child, in the sense that I, very early on, like I said, realised my mum and dad were going to stay together. And I guess I was full of rage because there was no safety now. So this had come to an end, one phase of it. But because I knew my mum was going to bring him back into the home, and in fact she'd made me go and visit him in prison.
Wow.
And so so of course, what does that do to a child? They've got no safety now. So
how have you ever trusted any human being ever again? Sorry to interrupt you, but
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I do now, and we'll come on to how I've done that and what I do with other people, and how I've created that safety container for myself. But it's self-taught. I obviously became a psychotherapist and had to train, but before that I had to self-teach. I had to learn how to ground my own nervous system, because there was no, when I say there was no help, there was no help for me. So where I was having to visit my dad in prison, and everyone at school obviously knew about it because that's where it came out. So I was being bullied at school, and lots of boys who didn't know what they were saying would say horrible things about me, my dad, sex, all this stuff. So I became a girl that was full of rage. And let me tell you now, little girls aren't allowed to be angry. Little girls are not allowed to scream and shout and swear, because little girls have to be good and pretty and quiet and subservient. Certainly back then, that's why I said my age, because this was, going back 35 years ago. Society wasn't equipped for someone like me. So I ended up trying to communicate my pain in ways where someone would hear. So that would be cutting. So I cut a lot. I've unfortunately got lots of scars on my arms, which I used to be deeply ashamed of, because, the whole attention seeker thing was said to me a lot. And I would be stitched up, and now I'm kind of like, look, they are what they are. I can't change the fact that that's how I express my anger. But it was one of the only ways people would stop and listen, because they wouldn't hear my words. They certainly wouldn't hear me if I was angry. But the problem is with cutting yourself, it becomes addictive, because one, it breaks the state of absolute, what feels like wild madness. But two, when we bleed, we release dopamine, because it's a survival mechanism in the brain. So you get this reward chemical when you release blood. So you become quite addicted to that whole process. So then what I used to call suicide attempts, now say was another form of communication. So what would happen would be that I wouldn't get heard, the cutting wouldn't work, I'd still be called the problem by my mum, people would still be saying horrible things to me in the street. Only 2 doors down, I remember being outside, probably I was about 14 years old, in the garden in summer, and for whatever reason the girl 2 or 3 doors down decided to shout abuse at me and talk about, over the garden, shout about what my dad had done. And so I couldn't escape it. So I would then think, well, maybe if I took tablets, and maybe if I take an overdose, then people will start to care. So you start to do the extreme things for people to stop being horrible, or for people to see you, or for people to love you. So I got into the habit of cutting, overdosing, these silly things, but they weren't silly at the time. They were survival mechanisms at the time. So of course, from the outside, I would look like I was mental.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Angry. And I'd go to the doctors and try and get help there. But the GP that I had was also my dad's GP.
Oh, excellent.
And he would tell me I was wasting their time.
What? Really? Like, but your dad's doctor knew what had happened to you.
Yeah.
And he would say, like, what is wrong with people? Like, seriously, what the hell is wrong with people? Like, you would have thought that your mum, like, would have just swept you up and left the country and, like, just cradled you, right? And said, oh, my God, I'm so sorry that, but it just blows my mind that you were, like, subjected to, like, it's even worse abuse afterward. Do you know what I mean?
You're right to a degree, because the physicality of abuse is what everybody focuses on. You say the word sexual abuse and people are like, ugh. But actually, not being safe is the wound. Yeah. Feeling unloved is the wound. Feeling not seen. That's why I talk about the self-harm and the overdoses, because I was trying to be seen. Yeah. I was trying to be heard. I was trying to be safe. So, these methods are, if a child is doing that, if a child is self-harming, if they're taking overdoses, if they're full of anger, we need to stop, listen and pay attention. They may not be being abused, of course, but no child uses that as a form of communication unless they are deeply wounded and hurting. And it could be a number of reasons. So that complexity of trauma, the ongoing lack of safety, the ongoing lack of being seen and lack of being loved was really the wound. Yes, the beginnings of that is sexual abuse, physical abuse, but the wound was, I'm not safe, I'm not seen, I'm not loved. And I carried that for a long time. So the other issue is that you don't have boundaries. So you don't know what that looks like. If you don't have, again, going back to the prefrontal cortex, if you don't have framework given to you of safe boundaries, safe behaviours, you don't know what that looks like in other people. So at 13, I'm drinking with older men. I was raped at 13 by a 20-year-old.
Wow.
Because, again, I don't have the safety barriers. Raped at 17 by 2 men. Because I don't have those safety barriers. I'm a child. I was raped at 17 again. I didn't tell anyone about that one, because when you reveal sexual abuse as a child, just to give information here, you have to go to see a doctor. You have to be internally examined. And don't forget, when I did reveal this information about my dad, what happened was, when he got out of prison, he was allowed to come home. So in my mind, what is the point of going to the police and telling anyone?
Yeah.
I've been labelled the problem.
How old were you when he came home? How old were you when you came home?
I again, this is sketchy, so I'll say I think it was 14, 15.
So you were not even an adult, and he was allowed to come home and to, like, what the hell is wrong with society? Well, we know what's wrong with it, but it's just permeating.
I don't know if that would happen now.
Sure.
I don't know if that would happen.
Yeah, but even back then, like, think about it. Like, it's the worst thing you could do to a child. Like, the worst thing you can do. There's nothing worse you can do. You could be a drug addict. You can be an alcoholic. You can be, you can neglect your children and all that sort of stuff, which is horrendous.
I mean, we're the same age, Ella. And yes. I remember being young at school, and I remember programs around that we were talking about, well, parents definitely were talking about that sort of stuff back then. So, yeah, maybe it's changed a bit, but back then, like, it blows my mind to think that the powers that be would put a predator back in with its victim.
Fuck. I don't remember anyone even questioning it. Not only, professionally, but even the community around us. He was just coming back in because.
When you spoke with your mum about this, like, you were 11, right? So you're probably not fully formed mentally because of all the shit that's been going on to you, but you've grown up really fast. I take it, right?
Yes.
You'd have grown up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And when you had these conversations with your mum, I'm assuming you had conversations with your mum, did she not, like, she obviously had no care for you whatsoever. She was just like, it just didn't matter. You had to suck it up.
Basically that. I mean, I've kind of done a lot of thinking around this as I've become an adult, especially as being a mum to a daughter myself. So I, in my job, have to understand brain-body development because I have to be able to work out for each individual what their blueprint is. And the only way you understand someone's blueprint, their personalised blueprint of trauma, stress, pain, is to understand not only their presenting issue, but also what's happened in their family, what were their parents like, what were their grandparents like, what are the things they've learned, what are the genetic expressions and imprints that they carry. So it's a very holistic process. So I look at my mum and I now realise that she had a difficult relationship with her own mother. Her mum, my nan, who I was actually in love with, did have some mental health issues. I now believe, because I've been diagnosed with ADHD, I now believe that her mum would have had the sort of genetic imprints for something like ADHD. She wasn't very emotionally regulated. My nan was born in 1918. This is a time where they wouldn't have been encouraged to talk about their feelings. Their emotions would have been locked down. So I don't think she was emotionally very present for my mum. My mum wasn't very emotionally present for me.
Yeah.
Equally, I think because my nan would have lots of breakdowns, she would go away for long periods of time. So my mum would be left with her dad, who was a beautiful man. And I think her safety and her love was based around the male figure, the father.
Good catch, mate.
When my dad then did that to me, I don't think my mum could bear the truth. So you talked about compartmentalisation earlier. I think she compartmentalised the truth. She needed a man on a pedestal. Her dad had died when she was 21. So I think she put my dad on that pedestal. They met shortly before that, maybe a year or two before that. My dad took the place of her dad. He was her safe, I think this is her, how I looked at it. He was her safe person. So when this came out, even though he admitted it, there was a denial. And I think she just pushed it to the side and said, no, we have to keep the family together. So there wasn't a choice for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
She had already made that decision. Her survival, her safety, her existence was based on the male being the leader. Because, again, she didn't have that love in her. This isn't being said by her. This is what I've had to work out. And the reason I've done that is not to excuse, but is to understand. Because if I can understand, I talked about ego boundaries earlier. If I can understand, I can individualize and say, it's not because I'm not enough. It's because she couldn't cope.
Have you? Sorry. Have you, like, you feel like you've really evolved as a human being, clearly, but have you? You must have forgiven. You must have forgiven your mum and your dad, because otherwise you would just be, you would just destroy yourself, right?
Well, you have to make a choice. This is so important. I have lots of conversations with my own clients about the quantumness of life, of the human experience, of the potential. And it's very hard when, again, in my early 20s and teens, I was very much in trauma and very much in pain. The trauma was obvious. The pain was obvious. I was not a fully functioning human being. I was getting by. I was surviving. But there were key elements. I think after the rape at 17, I kind of had this, it took a while to build from there, but I had this realization, because by that point I'd moved out at 16 to get away, because my dad was violent again after he came out of prison. So that's when I left the home.
Hang on. He was violent as in he hit you, or he was sexually violent as well?
It wasn't sexual violence.
But he was violent.
Yeah, he was physically violent. So,
and your mum knew this?
Yeah, she saw it. She witnessed it. And so did a whole room full of people. I mean, this wasn't hidden behind closed doors anymore. It was full of it. It was on Boxing Day. We had a house full of people there, and he did it in front of everybody. But again, everyone knew anyway.
But How were your parents
family
not ostracized? You know, like you think, oh, they must have been outcasts in the town, village, city, or whatever that you lived in, and probably you would have been a victim of that, but clearly not. That's mind-bending.
It was interesting, actually, and it's difficult to talk about because I'm still in touch with some of the adults who are beautiful people, but I don't think people knew how to handle this. So it's a difficult one for me to get my head around because I feel like society and everyone around me failed me. But I don't want to carry anger about that. I have to understand people's motives. So a couple of the families that were close to us, I think one of the reasons that they stayed close to my parents was so they could stay close to me.
You.
Yeah, they wanted to almost watch over me, and the only way to do that was to not ostracize them. I don't know if that's an excuse or if that's denial or if that's just I don't know what that's about, and I'll never know, but I've had to try to understand that to be able to forgive, move on, and understand people's reasons, which is what I've probably been very good at, because I think when you are a child sexually abused by your dad, you have to have a level of understanding in a way that you don't if it's a stranger outside the home, because you can't not make him your dad. He's always going to be your dad, and your mum's always going to be your mum. So you do take on some level of responsibility for your mum, your dad, and any other family. You do tend to naturally do that as the child, because again, what I said earlier, the child self-abandons, so they find a way to fit in. Because if you don't do that, you are ostracised. My mum used to say to me all the time, I could put you into care. So you have to let that. That's what I mean. She was quite manipulative. And I would say she sits somewhere on the narcissistic scale, because it's all about protecting herself, protecting her story. And she would say that she cared about me and she tried her best, but she tried her best from the point of view of protecting herself first.
Yeah.
So that's quite narcissistic in its behaviour.
With forgiveness of your dad, your mum, the people who weren't there for you, the system that let you down, is that, because I know forgiveness, as I'm learning to understand, can almost be like a removed thing. You can forgive somebody from a distance. Or for you, was it more hands-on, face-to-face, or was it enough for you to just forgive them but without having to?
No, I mean, I
directly
didn't have that choice. I didn't have that choice. So because my mum would make me go to prison and see my dad and write letters to him, I was having to forgive whilst having a relationship with him. And then because he moved back into the home, and before he moved back in, there was a period of time he gets out of prison, and I'd imagine he was on probation for a while. So I think in that time he had to live in a bedsit or a flat, and then he was allowed to come back. So remember, before he moved, he didn't walk out of prison straight into the home. There was a period of time he had to live somewhere else. But we were seeing him, and he was coming to the home, and so we were having a relationship. I was having a relationship with my dad then, and so that you are taught to. Not to forgive, but you're taught that your dad's really, really sorry. And the narrative around it was, I mean, he became a born-again Christian for about 5 minutes, like so many people do.
Oh, yeah.
So we must pray for your dad, you know.
What a load of codswallop.
So I'm told that we've got to pray. I'm told that I've got to forgive. I'm told that I've got to understand. So there was no choice. So I guess part of it was conditioning, because I was taught to do that, and then part of it was actually I felt sorry for him. I think the narrative was so about poor dad, poor him. I did feel sorry for him, and I do still feel sorry for him, because I kind of think,
wow,
who wakes up and chooses to do that? No one decides as a 15-year-old boy, when I get older, I'm going to sexually abuse my daughter. No one makes that as a conscious choice.
But hang on, I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't care what's happened to you. Like, that's just a step way too far. You know, like, it's for me. That's sorry.
Can it be a proclivity rather than a result of his own abuse? Like, you're attracted to, I don't know, skinny people, fat people, kids. You know, like,
for some people, for sure. For some people, there is definitely a sexual attraction to children. We know that, and that's their excuse. So I don't know so much about my dad, because I've never had that conversation with him.
Yeah.
I think for my dad, I know there was a sexual assault for him. He was sexually assaulted once in a park. But what I will say about the neurobiological effects, because I think this is really important, because remember, I'm coming from two places, the abused child, but also the psychotherapist, and very neurobiology, neuroscience based as well. So I'll try and keep this simple. When a boy is sexually abused,
especially for us,
also for myself, because I can confuse myself. When a boy is sexually abused at a certain point in his development, particularly when his testosterone is developing, that's his sense of power and masculinity. So if a boy is sexually abused in his development, it can take away masculinity and power. So what happens is a split in the development, and they tend to develop a predator part. So think about archetypes, or Richard Schwartz's work. He's an amazing man who developed IFS psychotherapy, which is internal family systems. And internal family systems looks at parts, and it looks at trauma and parts, and how these parts develop to protect other parts of you. So in the case of a boy that's sexually abused, if his power is taken away at the point when his power is developing, a part will develop unconsciously that is a predator, so that he becomes the predator rather than stays the victim.
Wow.
Okay.
Look at the split in the development. The vulnerable child becomes the dominant predator. And that is also the same for narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, and the cluster B personality disorders. The victim becomes the predator. So that's deeply sort of structural, neurobiological, but this is what can happen, which is why I'm fascinated with understanding why people do this, because
that's what
if we don't do the research, don't get me wrong, I am a massive supporter of abuse victims. I am one, and so my first point of reference is to get them through their trauma. But my second point is, if someone is being abused now, a boy, and he doesn't get the correct help interventions, then he could become a predator. How do we know what the correct interventions are if we don't work with the people that have committed these crimes? And we can only find out what works if we do rehabilitation with them. Yes, we can lock them away and never let them out, but we also have to rehabilitate them, or at least try, because then we have data that tells us what works and what doesn't work. For the kids that are currently being sexually abused, that are going to need those interventions to be massive.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Like the forgiveness thing, like it was more for you rather than him, like, because you'd be carrying around this rage.
Yes.
You know, like, so, and you know, like clearly you've got a wonderful spirit. So, but in order for that spirit to flourish, you would have needed to like literally let go of all your anger, all your hurt, all your, you know, the times that, you know, you were neglected, abused, everything, to let that go in order to, you know, like to carry on with your life and to live a wholesome, you know, like in a life that you're leading now. So if you hadn't have forgiven him, your life would be so much different, wouldn't it?
You know what,
and your mum.
Yes. So I'd been in the process of forgiveness for a long time, because I'd had to, because I was confronted with both of them, that I was in a relationship with them. But since the age of 37, so 9 years ago now, I've had no relationship with them, and I've flourished and grown and really been able to correct the nervous system, because of course, as I was saying earlier, trauma doesn't exist up here, it exists in the body. For me, I was completely, they call it dorsal vagal state, where your nervous system goes into dissociation, disconnect, and it almost plays dead. So think of like the phrase dead woman walking. You know, you're there, you're present, you're doing life, but you're not really feeling it, you're not really connected. That's not to say I didn't love and I didn't have lots of happy times, but because I did. But I think it was a mask, and I think that I was very good at separating from that. But then, you know, if I was triggered, and I've got to take responsibility and accountability for being triggered, when I was triggered, that rage would come to the surface within seconds. And I could then become quite narcissistic and quite angry and quite the things that would come out of my mouth, that was this stored up, because I was masking all the time and thinking that I'd done the work, but it was still locked in my body. So the monster of abuse, the monster of trauma, I would embody that then. And so if you'd have seen me in those moments, again, wild, angry, horrible. And it's what people who don't want to talk about. People that have been abused, they don't want to talk about they've also been that wild, horrid version of self, because the trauma is like a spirit that lives in you. And I kind of, think about exorcisms. When we focus on the right form of therapy for people, it cannot just be talking. You can talk about your trauma for the rest of your life and you will never get rid of it from your body. I just want to say this, because this could be like, well, how does that work? For people that don't really understand somatics, they don't understand the nervous system. Your cells are like a military operation, and your cells will map according to your experience. Your military cells know exactly what to do. So if you've been abused, you will create cells in your body that will protect you from threat. So that will either be going into complete shutdown, lockdown, disconnect, or you'll fight, you'll run, and your body automatically knows what to do. It's been trained your whole life. So yes, there'll be sort of genetic dispositions, there'll be the learned experiences, and your cellular response, your military, will tell you what to do. In order to change that, we have to retrain the whole system. We have to redesign. We have to become the architecture of our brain and body. We have to decide who we're going to be. We have to tap into that potential.
How do you do that?
So,
is this neuroelectric therapy that you specialize in?
My neuroelectrics method is a combination of methods that I've trained in.
Okay.
So the neuroelectric method looks at, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What's your life look like today? What's your belief system? But then it goes into the subconscious more. So the subconscious is the brain body system. 95% of your existence is subconscious. So we look at the subconscious. I use tools that I've learned from hypnotherapy. I use tools that I've learned from EMDR, which is a brain-based reprocessing desensitized therapy. And I blend them with modalities to create what I call free flow analysis. So free flow analysis is where someone is in a deeply relaxed state, not hypnotized, but deeply relaxed. We've done some breath work. We've grounded the body. Eyes are closed. We use bilateral stimulation, which comes from EMDR. And we use Freud's free association to allow the subconscious to come up with whatever's natural. So I don't guide them, they guide me, and I let them guide me through that process. Then we analyze that information based on my training and based on how I would train other people now. We analyze the subconscious, and together as a team we start to go, well, where did you feel that in the body? When you felt that in the body, what were you remembering? We start to map out what triggers or what thoughts, what memories, what dreams, what ideas, what creations are triggering the body, and we start to work out what you're feeling and where. Once we know that, and this is where I talked about the quantum experience, we recognize that these cells have developed in your body in a way that's connected to your experiences, to your memories, to your thoughts. So now we have to break the networks and create new ones, and to do that we use things like meditation, but guided meditations, guided hypnotherapy, where we start to visualize. If someone's not very good at visualizing, we use auditory. If someone's not good at auditory, we use feeling. So you have to find what works for the person to be able to reprogram the system.
That's so interesting. Visualization, I thought everybody could visualize.
No, they can't. Some people can't.
It's so, when somebody told me that, I was like, what? Hey?
It's like we don't all have an inner dialogue too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Isn't that weird? I thought we all, it was a natural thing that you just visualize, whether it be, you're trying to achieve something, so you visualize it, whether you're, it's when somebody told me that they couldn't visualize, I was like, what are you talking about? That's how I operate,
I know, and it feels, I'm a visualizer, but actually I'm very responsive to audio more. So I always thought that visualization was my primary, but it's not, it's auditory. But I can visualize, and I see that as very, very beneficial to me. But if someone can't, we use the sensations. So, for example, if I wanted to if I wanted to get someone to change a feeling in their body, rather than visualizing that change, I would get them to feel that change. So I'd say something like, imagine your body is being bathed in warm water.
Okay.
How does that feel?
Okay.
You know, imagine that feeling across your body. Feel it where it feels, you know, the safest for you. And that's where they start to use those tools like water or sound or weighted blankets, whatever it is, to change the system.
Can I ask you, sorry.
No, you go.
Can I ask you a question about, you know, when people are, you know, you said before, people are triggered and if they've been emotionally abused, so then they become the dominant, you know, then they become the abuser. Yeah. But what about the people that have been abused that go on to be, you know, amazing parents, amazing uncles, amazing aunties, you know, like business people, good in the community and all that stuff? That's why I look at the people that don't, and I find it hard to look at them and go, oh, you know, sorry about that, you know, you were abused, so it's okay. Bullshit. It's like, you know, you come from a rough background, you come from a rough upbringing, you've been raised by an alcoholic or a drug dealer or whatever, yet those people can somehow manage to pull themselves up and out of it and don't slip back into where they came from. You know, so for me, if someone abused me and then I went on to be an abuser, I just think I was a complete and utter failure. It's, for me, it's like, hey, look at you. Like, you're the prime example. Like, you've gone on to, like, you know, like, just
change lives,
kick goals, like, amazing to talk to, like, just so engaging, right? Yet there's people that just use it as an excuse, and that's what I just can't cop. So why are some people able to, like, rise above it and become better people, whereas other people choose to go the other way? Whether they choose to or not, I don't know.
So this is quite a controversial one, but this is just an opinion.
Yeah.
So I always try and make sure when I give this opinion that I say it with the context of 20 years of experience working in this field now, also having to sort of be deeply introspective about some of my own behaviours. Like I said, I could be at times very, very angry and very, very, you know, not a nice person to be around at times. To give context to that, you know, I was a compulsive liar for a long time, you know, because I was taught to lie early on, not tell the truth, cover up for other people. So it became a natural habit for me to just tell stories.
Yeah.
So those sorts of things where there's so much shame attached to those behaviours. So that's where I'm going with this. So for some people, and my dad's 76, grew up in Glasgow, well, Paisley, at a time where people did not talk and people did not help you, and you weren't allowed to
show emotion.
Yeah, you weren't allowed to. So when we look at the way the brain adapts, because we see that there is emotional brain damage and there's physical brain damage, and emotional brain damage can be physical brain damage because of the way the brain structurally develops around trauma. Now, although my dad was sexually assaulted once that I know of, his family dynamics were, I suppose, of that time, growing up in the 50s and the 60s, where there would have been lots of traumas, post-war traumas, all that sort of stuff. The reason I say that is because people adapt to their own environments, people adapt to their own experiences, their brain adapts, their brain splits, personality disorders start to develop. So some people develop personality disorders. I certainly would have been diagnosed early on with a personality disorder. Now we know that CPTSD can manifest as ADHD, hence the reason I've ended up with the ADHD diagnosis. But I firmly believe that epigenetics gives us a code, and that code will either lay dormant or be switched on. And this is where I'm going with this. So we have our own traumas in life, and our environment and society and cultures shape that trauma even more. But also we have the field of epigenetics, which is where we carry the genetic expression of our grandparents. So the DNA structure remains the same, but the genetic expression molds and changes. So I would need to understand for each individual, which is the work that I do when I work with individuals, as best we can with the information that we have. What are your ancestors' traumas? Why do you think that some people develop, I don't know, narcissistic personality disorder and become abusive while others don't. It's probably because they've got pre-coded genetic expressions which are switched on or laid dormant based on their own experiences. Now, that's a reason, not an excuse. So I'm just going to caveat that with, now, in this day and age, if you feel you're having these heinous thoughts about what you want to do to children, doesn't there need to be a safe place or a safe person that you can go and speak to? How many people, I would like to think that people would feel safe talking to me about thoughts, not actions, because obviously if someone's acted out on that, I have to report it. But if you're a young man and you're having paedophilic thoughts, you need to be able to go somewhere safely and talk about that. There needs to be someone that isn't going to go, you fucking disgusted, let me help you with those thoughts.
Yeah, because imagine growing up, going through adolescence, or like me growing up, always knowing I was gay, and imagine instead of knowing that you're attracted to men as a man, imagine knowing you're attracted to kids and you desperately don't want to. You're kind of fucked, right? But you definitely have nowhere to go to, and that's never going to be, thank God, accepted. But there is a portion of the human population where that wiring exists, right? Like, can they be unwired like that? For somebody who's not acted on, there's got to be a place of feeling fucking terrible for somebody like that.
I'm so glad you've brought this up, right? Because this is so important, this bit of the conversation, and it's one that I'm really comfortable talking about. Other people aren't so comfortable, but I am. If someone is genuinely, and they may have been abused, they may not, but let's just say most people with paedophilic thoughts have been exposed to the wrong type of sexual activity or stimulus early on. And they can't help the way that their brain is shaped. They can't help that. That has happened to them whether they like it or not. And you can see this with psychopaths. They can't help being a psychopath. They can't help being a paedophile. So they come to someone like me and they say, I'm having these thoughts. If they don't have that outlet, what tends to happen is curiosity kills the cat, doesn't it? We are sexually driven beings. So at some point, that person is likely to gain access. It might start off as legal, I hate this term, but legal teen porn. So you can go onto Pornhub, put in teen porn, and you'll get, I would imagine, they will be of legal age. They might be 18, 19.
Look.
So they start to have a look. Then what happens is, because they start to get addicted to this, because it's the only outlet that they have, that's no longer enough. Because the dopamine receptors, remember, this becomes an addiction for them, the dopamine receptors get tired and lazy. So they now need more input to get the same dopamine response, to get the same sexual gratification. So now they have to look at something a bit more risky. The more they look at, the more they need. So now we've got someone that is accessing child porn. And if they'd have had a safe place to go in the first place, and someone that would work with them to say, look, these are just thoughts, they're intrusive thoughts, I would need to help them map their body out to feel safe in their body when they're having those thoughts, to understand how to build safe relationships. That's a very somatic, technical, brain-based therapy. But I would have to work with the individual and map that out with them. But if they don't know they're safe to go to somewhere like me, or someone that's willing to do that work, because they're going to be judged, someone's going to report them to the police, then they're going to go and watch this stuff. That's what I'm saying about rehabilitation. We need to have a place for people that are having those thoughts. So if Dad had had somewhere to go, I really truly believe this might have been prevented, but he was never going to have that place. So there's a break in their development. A personality disorder forms, sexual deviancies form as a result of that. And I've got to say this because people will go, yeah, whatever. But let me tell you how the brain works. There's 3 parts to the brain. This is the brain. Imagine this is the brain. The brain stem develops first, very early on. The middle of the brain, which is the emotional brain, is the second to develop very early on, driven by pleasure. Children are driven by pleasure. They don't have fear yet. They learn fear. They have innate things like embedded in the psyche, like fear of spiders and snakes, but they don't have the fear of something hot until they touch hot and they realise what hot is. Then the front of the brain, which is mid-20s. So let's say 3 or 4 children are really driven by pleasure. Even earlier than that, really, because, of course, they're driven by survival first, then pleasure comes second. So the 2 drivers of the emotional centre, which is the second part of the brain to develop, are fear and pleasure. Pleasure first, fear second. So, of course, the human is driven by pleasure. If someone doesn't have a safe place to go and they've been abused as a child, that pleasure is twisted and ruined and damaged. And that's what I had to learn. I had to learn intimacy. I had to learn pleasure. I had to learn safety. I didn't have that. Luckily for me, and I believe this is, if you believe in God, universe, whatever it is, I believe I was gifted with this experience because I had the ability, my brain, my body, my spirit, my soul had the ability to become a cycle breaker. But it could have been different. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why someone becomes a cycle breaker and someone becomes a predator. I think that is much more divine, quantum, whatever you want to call it, than we can ever put into words. What I do know is, without knowing the full answer to that, I want to be part of a movement that allows young people that have these intrusive thoughts, whether they've been abused or whether they are having paedophilic thoughts, to come forward and do something about it rather than become a perpetrator. Yeah. I'll never get to everyone and I'll never change it. There will always be paedophiles, unfortunately. We said this at the beginning. They're in positions of power. Some paedophiles are paedophiles because they're power driven and they're narcissists and they're psychopaths. So the narcissists and psychopaths don't have empathy and they don't have the ability to give a single flying you-know-what about anybody else. That's why they do such heinous crimes. I can't fix that. But the ones that want to be fixed, I want to work with them.
It's like, David, how we said before, how when we were talking about that, it was way back in our podcast and we talked about being gay. And when I was, 12, 13, I thought I was gay. But I never acted on any of those feelings. But I processed them myself and I imagined it all and, I acted it out and all that stuff. But I in the physical world, I never did it. And I'm not gay. But there was nobody that I could go to. Even though I was raised in the gay community, I still didn't feel comfortable going to, to anybody and go, hey, I think I might be gay. And if I was going through those things, there must have been heaps of other kids that were going through the same things. If there's shitloads of pedophiles, right? I'm sure there's lots of people that think they might be a pedophile, but don't. But if somehow have worked themselves around where they haven't acted on it, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's because they're a good human, or they just, do you know what I mean? They've just realised that they can't go down that track. But wouldn't it be easier if we had somewhere to go, and that these are normal feelings, even though it's, to me, like it's just so abnormal to paedophilia and all that shit. But for them, it's a normal feeling, right?
Can you say it's normal though, or is it like a disordered way of feeling?
Yeah, it's certainly it's dysregulated and disordered.
Yeah. But for them, it's normal, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's what.
But we say, right, this is controversial again. We say it's dysregulated and disordered because it is to us. Yeah. But if you go to certain cultures, even now, they would still be marrying their cousins who are 13, 14 years old. So to them, that is still perfectly natural and normal. And they don't question that because their culture doesn't question that, because their environment doesn't question that. So when we talk about normal, we have to remember that normal is an ideology, and it's to keep society safe and protected. But why is our culture saying that's not normal, and somebody else's culture says, well, actually, we're kind of okay with this? Yeah. So this becomes cultural, environmental. So normal is really an idea. Rather than okay, you could even neurotypical. If you look at neurotypical now, how many people are ADHD, autistic?
Everyone.
Yeah. Okay, well, here's
all of us.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Is it, how I say to you, it's not normal to be gay, but it kind of is.
Of course it is.
Because there's so many gay people, right? So the
maybe you mean natural.
It's not natural. Yeah, it's not Well, maybe it is natural. Well,
of course it's natural.
Well, it must be, but it's not.
Wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
But it's not normal.
Some people would question that, wouldn't they? Some people would say. Some people would say, let's have a look at the homosexual issue. Some people would say, well, were you born homosexual or did you become? Again, this is a question that can never be fully answered because everyone's going to have a different answer. Yeah. So we could sit here and debate these things all day long. You're going to get so many different opinions. Yeah. The point is that we have to create safety for people. Yeah. Remember I said earlier, the one thing that I never had was safety. We as humans are natural in terms of love and we want to be part of a community, and we want, and this is one of the things that is decimated now, but we want to be part of a community. We have to create safe spaces for people to have these conversations without shame.
But there is, quickly going back to the normalcy thing of, in some cultures it's normal to marry a 13-year-old child. You were saying earlier, when you were that little 7-year-old, your body instinctively knew that was wrong. So there must be a natural law and governing order that there are some things that are wrong, so which must make some level of that behavior or thinking type an abhorrence, or an unhealthy diversion, which, as you maybe can be treated, but like there surely is, like, it can't just be like some cultures it's okay, some it's not.
Yeah, for me personally, going back to that, embedded in my psyche feeling of this is not okay, I don't like this. Remember, I was sexually abused by my dad.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Okay.
There. But also, I think something that I'm going to say here is, again, uncomfortable for people, but it's something that I've worked with for a long time. There's lots of children that masturbate very early. So they masturbate from 5, 6, 7, 8. And they're doing that because they discover it, they like the feeling of it, and so they do it to self-soothe, or they do it because they're experiencing pleasure. They experience, therefore, what we would call sexual pleasure really early on. So when we talk about the embedded knowing that being touched by your dad or your brother or the teacher is wrong, it's because power is being used.
Got it.
But children can be sexual in terms of experience sexual pleasure on their own and enjoy that feeling very, very early. So when we talk about normal, we have to say when someone uses power to control a child, be it sexually, marrying a 13-year-old girl is clearly about control. But what we are saying is that to that culture, they would say, well, that's okay. To our culture, we would say it isn't okay. There will be people within that culture that say it's not okay, of course, now, the 21st century. But we have to bear in mind that our brains are shaped around our reality. Literally, when we talk about neuroplasticity, we talk about the wiring, the sat-nav. So if you're someone that's grown up in a culture where that's normal to you, the brain is wired around that normal. It's only when someone comes in and questions it and you go, oh, I didn't know that wasn't normal. The rest of the world is saying this isn't normal. This is where normal becomes or natural becomes a word that is so nuanced. So from a clinical point of view, from a cultural point of view, from a religious point of view, we've got so many different things in the pot here. That these conversations are so important because people that are very boxed in with a very limited mindset will say it's wrong. Yeah, I totally agree, but we have to look at the broader picture, zoom out, because the only way we fix the issues is to zoom out and be open, and have that compassion for human nature, but then try and go back in and heal from a place rather than judgment.
Hey, can I ask you? Sorry, were you going to say?
No.
Can I ask you a question around, like, clearly you said to us before that when you realised what your father was doing was clearly wrong, it changed the way you view the world and obviously intimacy and that stuff. So, what does intimacy look like for you, and how did you, then you went through the process of you were raped a couple of times, which is horrendous. But how do you find a safe space to express intimacy, love, peace, care, all those things that we all desire in a physical relationship? How did you manage to, or have you even managed?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think it's fully there. I don't think I'm fully in that space. I don't know if I ever can be. I would say that I understand this innate response in my body now, which I had before and I didn't understand. So, for example, if my nervous system was on on fire. So that could be on fire as in lots of adrenaline and dopamine, or it could be on fire as in collapse. It's something shutting down. I need to run, I need to fight, or I need to dissociate. I didn't understand this when I was younger. Now I do. So I would say I was always a very reactive person. I always felt like if I was in a situation where I was being assaulted or raped, I guess my early experiences is that you shut up and put up, you freeze, you dissociate, you let it happen, you don't speak up, you don't say anything, you don't scream, it's not safe to do that. So on all occasions of abuse and rape, I've never screamed, I've never shouted, I've never kicked, I've never punched, I've just let it happen. So a lot of my experience around intimacy would be someone might do something to me that I didn't like, even in a consensual situation, but I'd just shut down and I'd let it happen. So a lot of the time for me, even if it was consensual, I'd feel like I was being assaulted.
Wow.
Because the natural response was to go into shutdown. Then I would learn, I'd drink a lot, so you'd have sex when you'd been drinking, and you'd let go a little bit more, and then you might carry shame because you'd be embarrassed about letting go because you've never let go. And as I get older, I learn to step back and let my body go through the emotional response. So if someone was to want to do anything or make a suggestion, I would, you'd have to sit back, respond, not react. Let your body process it. Understand if you're pleasing, going into fawn mode, because you've got fight, flight, freeze and fawn. Fawn is a pleasing mode. I'll fawn over you, I'll please you, I'll do things for you. You have to understand if you're going into that, if you're going into freeze. You have to assess your body when it comes to intimacy and see your body as a quantum experience. It might take you 2-3 days before you know if you want intimacy with someone, because your body's gone into survival mode first.
Yeah.
So you have to really, it's a much slower processing experience intimacy. It's not something that you know straight away.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say to anyone. You can heal that wound, but it's about let the process happen. Don't be reactive. If someone's suggesting that you're intimate with them, or you're in a moment and you're really not sure, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You explain, I just need time.
Yeah.
And actually that's for whether you've been abused or not. I think
exactly. Exactly.
Our bodies take time to process information, so it's to not rush that process. So I think for me, and for anyone that's been abused repeatedly or even as a one-off, is to take the time to listen to your body, sit with the emotions, sit with the reactions in your body. Where do you feel it? Because often for me it would be tight chest, and that sense of you often feel it in your solar plexus above the belly button, a little kind of ball of something's happening there, and then it goes up into the chest and everything shuts down, and it's almost like everything's compressed. So if I get that feeling, I have to take time to process. I have to make sure. And also what I would say is 2 things that happen with girls and boys that are sexually abused or raped. They become hypersexual or hyposexual. So they become very, very sexual and may become sex workers or have lots of promiscuity, or they'll just shut down and become what we would call frigid. So you can go between those 2 as well. It's a really complicated thing, intimacy. But like I said at the beginning, you're never going to have the same cellular mapping in the body as somebody who had a normal, going back to that word, experience.
But can you, and I'm sure, well, I'm hopeful that you can, or that humans can you get that intimacy back? Because that's something that we all crave, that we all crave the touch. I'm not talking necessarily about the act, the sex act. I'm talking about, just that, the touch, feel, like the pleasure that you get from that, and that feeling comfortable with somebody's touch. And how do you, because for you, like if a guy touches you, like your response may be like, oh, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? Just because of what's happened to you.
You can get past that. And I have got past that response. What I would say is it's going into that idea of everything's potential. So who do I want to be?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be in terms of my career, in terms of, in my family, in terms of sexually, intimately, in friendships? Who do I want to be? You have to make those intentions, and you have to again go through that process of free flow analysis, work out what's going in the body. So you'd use each section of someone's plan. So imagine you're creating a plan to build a house, and you look at the bathroom, you look at the living room, you look at the kitchen. So we do that with each section of the person, and we design each room. And to design each room, you go through the free flow analysis, what's going on in the body, what's going on in the mind. Then we can start to use the right somatic tools, which are different for everybody, to release the cells that are stored there, visualization, sensory, whatever it is for that person, to then create a new reality. Because two things I'll say is repetition is recognition, neurons that fire together wire together, and the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined.
Yeah, that's true.
If you look at a sexual fantasy, if you fantasize about something that's really a turn on for you, there's a physical response to that sexual fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Imagining it, your body has a physical response, because the body can't tell the difference between real and imagined.
Wow. Yeah.
You say that's powerful, isn't it?
Hard.
So when
Literally.
very powerful, it's happening right now.
We needed a light moment though.
We did. It's been a very difficult conversation for most people, I'm sure, but that is powerful. We know that we can change the physical with the mind. So when it comes to intimacy in our own experience or anything we want to achieve, repetition is recognition. So the more we put it in, that input, the more the brain wires around it, the more it becomes autonomous. 21 days to create a habit, or 21 consistent repetitions, 90 before it's embedded, and then I would say another 90, so 180 repetitions consistently before it's autonomic. So
really,
we redesign everything, but you need to be guided.
Yeah, that's what we did. It's like, yeah, it's pretty weird, eh?
It's incredible.
This has been amazing. Hey, look, we've literally been speaking for, I can hardly see that, 80 minutes. But I feel like I could speak for another 80 more minutes. So I feel like it's like something we should come back to.
I mean,
if you know, because it's been like, for me, it's been like thank you so much for sharing and for being incredibly honest. And you know, like, it's just blown my mind actually what you've been through, what you've obviously suffered through, and where your life is now. Is like, it's a real credit to you, and like, it's been an absolute honour to chat with you, and I just can't believe that old mate's found you. Really, it's been so good. Like, you know, like,
and that you said yes. I mean, you took a massive leap.
But just the work that you're doing, and you know, like, how to because people in New Zealand can work with you, or people around the world can work with you. So, you know, like, and the stuff that you're doing, you're a bit of a hero.
We'll share any of that. But for people listening, can healing be started at any stage, any age, for anybody?
Yeah, so I mean, I do work with children, but if I work with children, I need to do that on Zoom or in person. There's 3 different ways that you can work with me. I do a mastermind experience, which actually enables the person to have 6 educational sessions with me, but they also work with my psychotherapy assistant that does the one-to-one with them in between to check in, so that I can make sure that I'm tweaking their individualized programs for them. So that's kind of like, if you don't want to have therapy, but you kind of want to do a course, which is a bit more intimate, you're getting that touch point with me, you're getting individualized program within that, then you can work with me one-to-one as well. And there'll be an app being released this year, as well as a training school being released. So the app is for people that perhaps don't want to do a mastermind experience, they just want to dip in and out of their own, you know, their own healing. I've got a book out there as well at the moment. There's another one coming. So for anything that you want to have a look at that I'm offering, it's www.ellamccrystal.com, and you can book through there, but you can also buy resources or book resources.
I'll put all the links in the show notes and everything like that. What's the name of your book that's currently out? I'll put all of the, make all of this available. Yeah,
that's on Amazon, which I'll send you the link for. That's Wounded Warrior Wisdom, and the one that's due out this year is called Letters to Myself, because going back to the beginning of the journey very quickly, the journal was about letters to myself, so it's how I managed to cope at the time. So the book's really about how people can use journaling and letter writing as a way to heal themselves.
I mean, your journal was literally like the portal to, I guess, your beginning or the extension of your suffering, but also the escape from it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, what a symbol.
Wow. Hey, Oh,
thank you so
Just
much.
thank you so much. It's been like I'm exhausted, but it's been really, really interesting and
you're
horrendous topic. But
an incredible human being.
What a human being! Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you both. You're obviously doing great work because you're holding the space for people to tell their stories and to, that reaches a wider audience in a way that we never know the power of that. We never know who's listening.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're both doing this and powerful and, wanting to put this out there, it says a lot about you guys as well.
It's just sad that the feedback we keep hearing from people like yourself or other guests is that there aren't necessarily that many places that this can be spoken about. So much of it's still so stigmatized and swept under the rug, and it just shouldn't be that way.
No, but that's what you're here for as well, is to bring that out into the open more for people to know that even if it's just by listening, they can understand themselves. It's important. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you should go and get checked for what are those things that they look really, they're old but they really look young.
No idea where this is going.
What are they called? Like a
vampire.
Are you a vampire? You're a vampire, right? I knew there was something about you.
Eternally young. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ella.
Thank you.
Good luck with the flooded ceiling.
Oh God, thank you for that.
Where do you live? You live in the UK.
I do in Northampton, which is probably, at the moment quite a depressing place for most of us to live. It's not. Northamptonshire is beautiful, but Northampton itself is, it's experiencing the results of political craziness.
Oh, okay.
We'll come down for some sun in the south of France.
Maybe you should come to the south of France.
Let us know.
I will. I literally will.
Come see us.
Awesome.
I would love to.
Well, I'll get your number and invite you.
See you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.